Imagine a day where children are guided and nurtured in a way that honors their unique humanness. A day where, instead of being expected to change in order to fit in, children can be met right where they're at. Welcome to Where They're Planted, a podcast for parents and care providers of unique children. Caring for a child with a developmental, emotional, or behavior challenge, a neurodiverse brain, or difficult early life experiences can be confusing and exhausting. On this podcast, we'll help your child flourish and strengthen their roots by helping you not only understand them, but also gain the skills to help them bloom where they're planted. We'll use brain science, nervous system tools, collaborative strategy sessions, and a deep understanding of the developmental process to create a fertile environment around your child in order to nurture their growth. I am your host, Jen Bluske, an occupational therapist with over 25 years of experience and a parent coach. My most closely held title, however, is that of a single mom of 2 thriving adopted kids, so I have walked this walk. I am truly excited to share, teach, and dive into these important topics on each episode. Welcome back to Where They're Planted. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with an autistic teen and having a conversation around honoring her experience and digging into what it means from her perspective to be neurodivergent. Blythe is so well-spoken and is able to say the things that I think so many teens who are autistic are trying to verbalize. And she just says it so beautifully. And I think that the power of hearing her, if you're a parent, if you're a teen who's found your way to this podcast, if you're a provider, is just hands down so important. Blythe is an advocate in understanding the autistic experience and such a role model for other teenagers learning to do the same in order to be able to live their most authentic lives. I am very excited today to have Blythe on the show. Hey, Blythe.
Hello.
I wanted to start just by letting you share just a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, of course. All right. My name is Blythe. I'm a freshman. I love activities like reading and writing, hiking, and drawing too. I volunteer at Angel's Wish, and my family fosters through there. And that's a cat adoption center. So I really love animals and working with animals. And I've lived in Madison my whole life. So I think that's about it.
Okay, sounds good. And so as we talk today about neurodivergence and the autistic experience, tell me a little bit about how you would describe autism to maybe somebody who doesn't understand it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think I would describe autism as a difference in the brain it's not bad, but it just means that people who have autism are different and they see the world with a different perspective compared to people who are neurotypical, and they have these different quirks and abilities that make them unique, and they have some shared struggles in the world which can make them sometimes appear strange or abnormal, but in reality that's just the way they process the world, and that is just how they cope and understand the world.
That's just such a nice way to say it. So, talking about the unique quirks and the things that make the autistic brain special, or I call them superpowers. In your experience, especially as a high schooler, tell me about that and those things that you're like, actually, no, this part, when my brain works this way, it actually really helps me.
Mm-hmm. I think that something that's been very helpful for me is the fact that I, like many other autistic people, have special interests. So whenever I'm really fascinated by something or really curious about something, I'll research things on my own and then I learn about them and I'm like, oh my goodness, that is so cool, which is really nice for me. And it's really been helpful in school. So, whatever I'm able to apply prior knowledge about something that I'm very interested in, it's just in general made me a very good student and very able to talk to people. And one of my hobbies is writing. So that's been super helpful, seeing as I would practice on my own. And that's given me a very good writing platform to kind of start on. And it's been really helpful to have those reading and writing skills. I mean, I think, like I mentioned, like whenever I'm super interested in something, then I get just ahead on it. And that's been really wonderful for me.
I just love that. I love that you're able to just really dig in when something's interesting, and that you've been able to find that writing for you is something that can really sort of take you in a direction you want to go, maybe as an adult. And what I'm thinking about is when you have an interest that you're really, really passionate about and really wanting to learn about, what do people do that are helpful or maybe not helpful around that? Like your parents or your teachers or friends or other people when you're really passionate about something?
So it's definitely very helpful when people encourage me and act interested in what I'm saying when I talk about these things, because then it makes me feel good. It sort of makes me feel like my interest is valued. And that's been just wonderful for me to have when I feel like other people acknowledge and appreciate what I have to say.
Yeah, to really appreciate the value you're bringing in that knowledge base and that interest, and really see you for, wow, this is super important to you, and not, oh, it's not important to me right now. That's lovely. What about when people are less supportive? What does that look like? What have you experienced there?
Yeah, sometimes I've kind of been made fun of for like some of my special interests, and I've gotten teased about it a couple times, and it just makes me feel like really rotten inside. Like maybe people aren't valuing what I have to bring to the conversation.
So I'm hearing again, just to be able to see you for you and just like honor you, right, is important. And I would imagine there isn't a human on this earth that doesn't want to see that and feel that. That makes good sense. Tell me about how your experience has been, whatever you want to share, around learning that you're autistic and then figuring out, do I like cover it up and mask, or do I be my authentic self? I can imagine that, especially as a teenager, right? Being a teenager in general is kind of tricky. How has that felt for you?
It's been a journey. I think a big part of that for me was I got diagnosed when I was, I'm trying to think, I think I was about 13, around 13 and a half. And I never really thought of that as a possibility because I'd struggled for the last few years, and I was like, wow, this is why. And realizing that like masking and trying to suppress who I was, that I'd been doing that basically my entire life at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And so now that you're aware, I work with so many teenagers to say the same thing, like once they figure out like, oh, I've been suppressing this or trying to act a certain way, even though it's not my authentic, how I feel inside, that sometimes it helps make sense. And so how has that helped you be your more authentic self? Or are you able to be your more authentic self? Or are there only certain places you can? Tell me about that.
I feel like it's been super helpful, for me at least, when knowing that I have autism. It's been very helpful for me to kind of embrace that kind of authenticity about myself, as in I've kind of been able to embrace that struggle that, oh, I don't have to force myself to do that. It's okay if I do this. Like this is just my brain and my body adapting. And I've kind of been able to embrace that as a part of who I am, as opposed to trying to be someone that I'm not, because that's the way society would like to perceive me.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Part of why I'm doing this podcast and why I'm really talking to parents is I really hope that parents and then maybe the community can see kids and can see people just for whoever they are and be able to really be honoring of what the brain and body is showing up with. So I love that so much. Let's talk a little bit about what's been the most supportive of you. Like, tell me about people or things or activities that have been just the most helpful for you.
I'd love to start by acknowledging the places that I feel the most at home would be definitely there's communities and places and clubs at my school where I feel like my interests are really celebrated and valued. And I really appreciate that. So that's been super helpful as a place to kind of encourage and grow the things that I'm interested in and kind of encourage me to fully blossom as my complete self.
Love it. And how did you find those clubs and those groups?
Just kind of through what's interesting to me, and then just kind of showing up and being like, hey, you know what? I'm here. And they're like, welcome. So that's been a really great.
I wanted to ask, because we have so many parents, how your parents have been helpful or supportive in your journey of, learning about your neurodivergence and becoming more authentically yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My parents have been the most helpful people in the world to me, honestly. They've been super accepting of me just kind of doing my thing. And it's been nice when we're able to relate and they're able to kind of help guide me a little bit. Like when they notice me doing something where it's like, maybe this isn't the best, maybe this isn't the healthiest. They'll help kind of correct me and help me figure out something that works for me. And we're kind of able to connect over those kinds of things and work out solutions that make it so that life isn't hard for me, but also I don't have to struggle with other people, like how they had kind of helped me as neurotypical people, help me kind of figure out how to navigate the world without causing a lot of trouble for myself.
So I'm hearing that they kind of like help bridge a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. They've always been super, super supportive.
Wow. By truly seeing you and your experience and then being like, hey, this is maybe the neurotypical experience. Let's see if we can figure out sort of that bridge or that connection point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's always been.
Yeah. If you have advice for somebody who's another parent of a child with autism or another parent of a neurodivergent kid, what would you say the most important things are for them to do?
I'd say that the most important things to do are to, well, a couple of things. One is to make sure that they feel safe and supportive and don't pressure them into things that they don't want to do, because sometimes that can be really harmful as someone who maybe doesn't quite understand or know what they're doing wrong. So not putting any pressure on them to mask or to be different or to not be who they are. And another thing is just to kind of be super supportive and really encourage them to do those things that make them feel comfortable and more like themselves. So it kind of goes both ways, but that's my biggest piece of advice.
Wow, that's so important. There's so many kids who are going to benefit from you sharing that. And then, on the flip side, because I'm assuming just like any other kid, sometimes your parents have to tell you no or set a boundary or an expectation. Is there
Mm-hmm.
something that's helpful that your parents do in order to, I don't know, just be able to help you do whatever the expectation is or the boundary or whatever it would be? Is there something that you guys have worked out to make that easier?
Honestly, we just kind of work it out with like a little bit of gentleness and acceptance, kind of settling on a compromise, especially with whenever they're like setting boundaries and things. Oftentimes it's like, oh, I don't realize that I do that. So instead of yelling at me and shaming me for it, they'll kind of gently correct me, which is honestly, I think, the best way to do that.
Wow. It's so important to hear that because, I mean, of course, like, that's what parents have to do some of the time, but there's so many ways to do it. And I'm hearing that for your brain, well, and, I'm going to argue probably for a lot of different kinds of neurology, coming at the idea with gentleness and coming at the idea with shared problem solving can really help it make it a lot easier for everybody.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just so cool. Another question I have is what do you wish schools, right? You're a freshman in high school. And so like you've kind of been through a lot of school already. What do
Mm-hmm.
you wish schools knew about autistic kids and schools did different to help you or to help you be more yourself?
I definitely think that schools are one of the worst places for neurodivergent people. I feel like there's not a lot of resources or tools that can make it easier for us to adapt, especially in a world that is for and about neurotypical people.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of that inherent struggle, but what I wish schools would do would be to offer like some sort of counseling service, especially available to neurodivergent people, like a safe space where it's like, okay, if you're struggling, you can kind of come here. If you just need a break, you can kind of come here. Or if you're feeling overstimulated, you can kind of come here. Just establishing safe spaces and safe places where neurodivergent people who might be struggling can feel like they can go and just kind of take a deep breath.
Yeah. So I'm just so glad you said that because I can't imagine how exhausting it often feels probably for you to maybe make it through a school day, even though I'm hearing that you love to learn and that you seek learning and I think that there's a long ways to go. And I'm glad that you give that insight into school again, because that's the experience of so many kids I've at least worked with. I have one more question, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you about the future. So, right, you're a freshman, you're probably like starting to slowly think about like what you want to be as an adult or what you want adulthood to look like. Maybe, maybe not. And that's okay too. But what are your dreams for the future? What are you hoping to have your life be like or look like?
When I'm an adult, I want to have the autonomy to be able to do things without feeling a ton of pressure from society. So my dream is to grow into a person who doesn't really care about social barriers, because I think looking past all of the social barriers is another one of my superpowers, and I'd really love to be able to harness that, because sometimes I see myself and I'm like, why do I judge people based on these things that society has said? Why can't I just use what I think? So that's a part of it. And I'd really love to become a veterinarian or work with animals, because I feel like that's always kind of been where I've wanted to go since I was a really, really young kid. Mm-hmm. So I want to continue to learn. I want to go to college, and I just want to keep being able to learn and work with animals and keep doing things that I love.
I think that's awesome. I love that you're striving to be your truest self and to break down those social barriers and not let them define you or frankly anybody else. I hear that that's such a superpower of yours, and I wish that more people were able to have that as their superpower as well. It's pretty awesome. If there's any advice that you have for other autistic teens or their parents, what would you say?
I would say to other autistic teens, don't be afraid. Don't try to mask yourself. Don't try to hide yourself. Try to embrace who you are, and also try to kind of figure out how that works with other people so that you aren't constrained by society's needs of you, but at the same time, you aren't facing them adversely and causing just more problems and struggles for yourself. I think it's all about finding that balance. And I think that that's a very important part of finding who you are, but just continuing to be yourself and continuing to embrace yourself for who you are and being able to use resources and have safe spaces. I feel like that's very, very important. And also, if you just don't know how to do things, just doing a little bit of research on it, being like, how can I? Because there's tons of resources out there you have access to on the internet and everything. I mean, I know I can't be prepared for every special situation, but there's always someone on the internet who is. So that's a good place to go if you are feeling a little lost.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about parents? What is any advice you have for parents out there, maybe raising teenagers who have autism or a child?
I think that you're kind of the bridge for, so again, just not forcing any expectations onto your children of like, you must be this. It'd be great if you could mask this, but at the same time, helping them to bridge the gap and become better people by offering corrections and help so that they're able to form that balance where they're able to still be their true, authentic self and yet not face social adversity when it comes to that, and help break down the barrier between them and society that neurodivergence can sometimes put on people.
Absolutely. That's so well said. All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Where They're Planted is a Lit Path Studios podcast and is produced by Jamie Gale and Jen Bluske. Music is by Gaston Reen and Pod 5. Thank you for loving your child right where they're planted.